So here she is. Here's my lovely friend, Wendy Sneddon, all the way from up Scotland.
Hello.
Although she doesn't have a Scottish accent.
No, only when it suits me.
Only when it suits you, yeah. But she is married to a lovely Scotsman. So, Wendy, we're here to talk about, now we normally have a very nice time together. And today we are going to have a nice time, but we've got a slightly more important and more serious conversation to have. And this is regarding the campaign that you and I actually have been working together on about creating more awareness about violence, domestic abuse and violence in the home. And you're specifically here today because as part of the campaign, we know that with lockdown, the rise in domestic abuse has gone up exponentially with, 46% more calls to the helplines. More women particularly and children have been killed during this time. But we're here specifically because of your work that you're doing with abuse against animals in the home. So can you give us a little bit of an insight, please, as to the work that you do and how you got involved in it, what your background is, first of all, please?
Cool, yeah. So I trained as a veterinary nurse, long time ago, and worked in veterinary practice for a while. I got involved with a group called the Links Group, which was set up about 20 years ago. In fact, next year will be our 20-year anniversary. The Links Group came about after some work that was done by Dr. Helen and Ranald Munro, and they were veterinary pathologists, and they started to notice some anomalies in some of the postmortems that they were seeing. They did some work with human pathologists and doctors specialising in non-accidental abuse in children, and noticed that the injuries were identical. So over the last 20 years, we've been working to educate vets on how to recognise non-accidental injuries in animals, and then what to do with the client in the waiting room who might be a victim of domestic violence themselves, or they might actually be the perpetrator. So we do a day's training course where we take them through a system of questioning and just kind of give them the sort of key things to look out for, and we make recommendations on where they then signpost people to, and we've got some resources that we can give practices. We've written a guidance document for the veterinary practice team so they can read about what to expect and what to do. And we're also working on developing some online training for our veterinary practices to continue to raise awareness. Because what we know from the research that Helen and Ranald Munro did was that when animals are abused, humans are at risk, and when humans are abused, animals are at risk. And that was a phrase coined by the American Humane Society, and there's a lot more research being done in the US on this whole subject. There's some brilliant research being carried out at the moment by the University of Edinburgh. A lot of our vets are taking part in it, so we're looking forward to seeing what the statistics show and hope that that will help drive further research into how we can continue to raise awareness and help to end abuse in animals and in humans. We also, the Links Group is a multi-agency group, so we have animal welfare professionals, vets, nurses, and we also have human healthcare professionals, so social workers, health visitors, and some nurses as well. And we kind of work together with them. So one of the things that came out of some of the questions they had was they were concerned about going into homes where they were dealing with families that were perhaps under suspicion of abuse or being supported. And they had pets, and they were nervous about what might be happening to the pet as well. And so we put together an online module called Understanding Animal Welfare in Violent Homes, and that's been circulated quite widely. And if anyone's interested in doing that, I'll certainly share the link at the end. It's just a short module that kind of shows you kind of what to look out for. And I think at this time, I know we're going to talk a bit more about that, I know that the animal welfare agencies haven't necessarily seen an increase in calls about cruelty at this stage, but they believe that that's partly due to the fact that people are just not making those calls and not coming out. And actually, when lockdown is over, the true picture will emerge, and we're quite worried about what that might look like.
So, is the Links group, is it a nationwide group? Did it start in Scotland, but now it's in England and Wales and perhaps in Northern Ireland as well?
Yeah, it's I guess the founders of the Links group originated from Scotland, and the SSPCA in Scotland had started a first strike campaign because they were acutely aware of the link because of the circumstances they were seeing when they were going into seize animals, and so from that work it kind of extended. But because the veterinary profession is quite small, and the people who founded it were involved in the sort of the British Small Animal Veterinary Association, the British Veterinary Association, we kind of got all these agencies involved, and we generally meet down in London.
So everybody, all the veterinary practices should be aware of this. Is that true? Are they all engaged in this?
No, sadly, we're just a small group of volunteers. We can only do so much. We're managing to deliver 2 to 3 training courses a year. We are in all the vet schools. We teach a module to the 3rd year vet students. Right. So that awareness is starting to build, but there's still an awful lot of people that probably aren't aware of the link, and probably haven't thought about it.
So if
behind doctors were.
Yeah, so if vets aren't aware of it, then it's possibly something that our listeners have never thought about themselves. I'm guessing that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Certainly
not. I talk to people every day about it, and it hadn't occurred to them that might be something to think about. It does make people think. So really raising awareness of that, because what we can do is, because we know there's a link, and we know that if someone is harming an animal, it is highly likely they are harming someone else in the household, and vice versa. If you think something's going on with your next door neighbour's dog, then just report it, because chances are the welfare agencies could attend, and potentially, because they're aware of the link, they can alert other agencies if they have concerns. And yes. I think at this stage,
just clarify, Wendy. Yes. So it's really important that we help people to understand here that if they are concerned, and they may not have noticed anything about adult abuse or children's abuse in the neighbourhood, or with their neighbours, but they have seen somebody being really cruel to perhaps their dog, or is it generally dogs we're talking about?
I think we don't have enough information on the kind of numbers involved at this stage. That's the research that's just been gone underway recently. But I guess from an awareness point of view, you're more likely to notice your neighbour hitting its dog than you are the cat or yes. perhaps smaller animals. So you're more likely to see that kind of behaviour, if you like.
Okay, so that's where we need to get to. So then at the very least, if you notice that there is abuse going on of a dog, what you're saying is that there will almost a high percentage that abuse is being spilled over into abuse of a child or an adult in that household.
It's highly likely.
And that if you report that to the police or to the RSPCA, that they are aware of the link, and therefore you're not only kind of doing something for that animal, but potentially you're doing something, a lot of help for the adults in that household too, and whether they're adults or children. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And at this stage, anyone, because victims of domestic violence are not really getting the opportunity to talk to anyone at the moment, and because of the setup, any opportunity for somebody to visit a household gives them that chance, that opportunity to maybe speak out to somebody.
Yes, and we know that 88% of domestic abuse incidents happen in the home. So the likelihood of somebody being a victim at the moment and those incidents being escalated is really high, and the evidence suggests that. But you've been talking to the RSPCA, haven't you, and the RSPCA, the Scottish version, I can't remember what it's called.
The SSPCA.
SSPCA, thank you. And the figures there, you know, as you say, are quite different in that, you know, the reporting has gone down, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the incidence has gone down. It's the reporting of this that's gone down.
Yeah. What they're seeing is they're not seeing a reduction. They're just not seeing an increase on the same scale as perhaps we're seeing in the human side of it.
Yeah.
But that raises more concerns, because we probably in the veterinary practices only see a very small percentage of non-accidental injuries, because the majority of animals will end up being killed by the violent partner in the household. So that, I guess, if suddenly your neighbour's dog disappears, could be more of a red flag than anything else. But that is, of course, the other side of it is that there will be many, many more animals being killed as a result of this lockdown and people not being able to get out and about and notice things and report things.
Now, what we do know is that we have to be really careful about, you know, if we are aware, and the last podcast I talked to a wonderful lady called Seema Danak about how we as individuals can flag up or support somebody that might be in their own home suffering with domestic abuse. And we specifically talked about, you know, somebody that might be on social media and have an all-female or an all-male group, a private group, where they could offer discreet support on a kind of traffic light system. So even if, you know, you're not thinking that you're under danger on that particular day, you could send a green heart, and that admin would be able just to reach out to you to just give you a virtual hug. An amber heart would be, actually, I'm really quite upset and I need some support, a bit more support than just a little message. And a red heart being, actually, I'm in danger here, I'm really in trouble, and I need you to do something now, because it's a discreet way. You know, these men or women that are being abused, they are being watched all the time, and this is the problem, isn't it, with them being in the home. In the same way that the dogs are in the home, we're being told we can only walk them once a day, that we can't go very far, and therefore the chances are for that frustration and anger to boil over, particularly for a pet, is quite an interesting dynamic, isn't it? We do know that for adults, it's generally not a moment of anger. Domestic abuse is not like that. This will be something that is much more calculated. But I'm guessing that for pets, you know, it's almost all too easy, really, to be able to lash out at something, you know, defenseless in front of you that's not going to be able to stand up.
Yes, yeah. And I guess one of the worrying things is that some research coming out of Bristol University, hopefully later on this year, initial findings were that 66% of survivors who were questioned said that their pets were a factor in the decision to leave, and that all of them either stayed where they were, delayed leaving, or actually returned back because they were worried about what was going to happen to their pet. Now, we work with pet fostering agencies, and because refuges can't necessarily accept pets for various reasons. So people have to then find foster carers for their pets, which again is a big challenge at this time, and people will delay making that decision to go, because perhaps they perceive that they might not be able to get their pets fostered. But what I would say is that the pet fostering agencies will do everything they can to help at this stage, as will anybody. So I think it's, you know, you've still got to raise that alarm and talk to somebody about what's going on, and everybody's there waiting to help.
And in a way, you know, it's a bit like, you're not necessarily going to go to your neighbour and say, I heard you screaming and shouting last night, is everything okay? Because that's quite a, you know, there should be no judgment here. It's all about accepting what anybody says, about what's happening to them, and not creating them, making them feel worse, because they'll already feel guilt and shame and embarrassed about what's happening to them. But actually, pets are a way that we can connect, aren't they? Really,
absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting. People seem to find abuse of animals, they seem to think of it as a lot worse than potentially abuse of humans. That's a big generalization, but you know, when we have conversations, you know, seeing pictures of pets injured absolutely horrifies people. So I think you know, if you're concerned about someone's pet, and you can have a conversation about your concern around the pet and what can you do to help, that might elicit, you know, they might tell you something.
Yes, and there's always the opportunity with maybe even passing a little note and saying, you know, oh, I bought your dog some dog food, and putting a little note in saying, is everything okay? You know, just send me a red heart on text if you know, if you need anything, or if you're really desperate for some help, because, you know, we can, like, you can call the NSPCC for an animal. You can also make it known to your local police force, or call 999 if you're really concerned about what's going on. You put this person on the radar, so that there is a file created. So that file will be created whether or not it's for an animal or for a human or a child. And so if there is a 999 call that comes out of that household, you don't even need to know their name, just their address, and say, I'm concerned about this pet or this person. It's in this household, this is what I've heard, or this is what I've seen. And if there is a 999 call from that household, then the police will know, actually, this is a red flag here. We need to get out to that household pretty quickly. Yeah,
it's also important to not assume that someone else, and another neighbour may have seen it and may have made that call. They may not have, but you know, it sometimes takes 3 or 4 calls to build a case. So the more reports they get of people concerned, the better. We've actually done quite a lot of work with Crime Stoppers, and Crime Stoppers understand the link between animal and human abuse. So they will take calls about animals, and they will field them onto the relevant animal welfare agency or police force in that area. And again, it just helps to build that picture. So if you're concerned about, you know, making a call, then do it anonymously. Through Crime Stoppers. It can be done online, or you can just give them a ring and have a chat with them, and they can even advise you on kind of where to go next, if you like. But I think it's important that, like you were saying, no judgment. There are so many complex reasons why people don't leave. I think the stats are that it takes around 36 incidences of violence before a woman will tell someone that she's in trouble. So they, you know, people will put up with a lot before they realise actually that this isn't good enough anymore. And so you may know someone who's maybe, you know, not had that many instances of violence, and so they're still kind of not ready to leave, if you like. And I think we have to make sure that we don't judge, but we just make sure that we are there to support.
And we don't judge otherwise about social standing or colour or race or creed or you know, how much money they've got or they haven't got. You know, this abuse of animals and children is across every part of society in the UK.
1 in 4 women are affected by domestic violence. So how many people live in your street? You know, how many people in your family? It will be going on. You might just not have noticed or been aware of it because it's not been on your radar, but we all need to become much more aware of it.
Well, that's great, Wendy. And one of the things we've been talking about is, at the moment during lockdown, is that there are very few places that potentially victims are going at the moment. They're maybe going to their local shop or their supermarket, but I'm guessing that they might be visiting their vets. Some of them are veterinary services.
Vets are still open. They're open for emergencies. What I will say is a non-accidental injury is classed as an emergency. So make that call and go down there. And
if you are you know, worried about your own safety in the house, then when you take the animal, then, you know, write a little note and say, you know, I'm in danger too, or please help me too. And pass that to the nurse or to the receptionist, even if they're not in the link scheme. You know, still take that, because you don't know whether they're in a link scheme or not, or whether they're.
No, we quite often get contacted by veterinary practices where they've seen something that they're worried about and they're not quite sure what to do about it. So, you know, they'll call one of us and we'll have a chat with them and kind of guide them in to do the kind of right things. So, you know, most veterinary practices know of the links group, although they might not be fully aware of the processes that we teach. They will know how to get hold of us, or they might contact the Royal College Professional Conduct Department, in which case they will be advised by the legal teams who are also aware of the link, and they will give them some guidance too. So it's that it is
and the
everywhere.
person themselves could actually just say, you know, because that veterinary practice has their address, you know, please inform the police that I'm in danger, and they will, you know, that person when they're gone can phone the police and say, you know,
absolutely,
this man or this woman's been in with a pet, we're concerned about it, we've got this note, it's clear that, you know, this person is under danger.
Yeah, I think if you're in danger, then take any opportunity to get a message to someone to get you help.
And that's important, because just to be clear, because a lot of people don't know, you know, how much control people suffer. So they probably don't have the autonomy anymore. They might not have any control over their money, over their phone, their social accounts are being monitored all the time. You know, their self-worth is so low and self-esteem is so worth. They're probably being told that, you know, everything is their fault. You know, this is the reality of domestic abuse. And even if there's no physical violence, you know, this coercive control or gaslighting, as it's known as well, you know, this is what we really need as a nation, particularly at this time when we are looking out for each other a bit more during the lockdown. You know, this is our time to actually really think about what is happening in your local neighborhood, in your local community, in your family even, and maybe even your friendship group or your colleagues.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the veterinary teams play a small part in kind of helping the wider issue. But there are lots of people who have to visit people's homes as part of their jobs. We've got the posties, we've got, you know, British Telecom, we've got plumbers, electricians, all these people who have to go into people's homes. You know, although they might not be doing it as often at the moment, you know, if you are a contractor and you are still working and you are visiting someone's home, just pay a little bit of attention to anything that might be going on in the household.
Well, Amazon drivers, because
absolutely,
you know, food delivery, Tesco's, Asda, Waitrose, whatever other markets, you know, are available. But you're absolutely right. You know, turning up and putting you know, as you open the door for them to drop it on the doorstep, you know, with a little bit of savviness, you could tell. You know, if you're looking out for it, you can tell if somebody's kind of embarrassed, or, you know, they're worried about what's going on behind them, or, you know, you've got a dog that is obviously being restrained, or, you know, just look out for those things. And I think that's a really good point that you've made.
And also, you know, if you are expecting a delivery of shopping, you know, and you have the opportunity, then let them know that things aren't right and you need help. And they can alert the authorities for you. And I think more and more people are becoming aware of this situation.
You know, it's been on the news a lot. There's been a lot of coverage of it. So, but, you know, what the campaign is about is that it's always appeared like somebody else's problem. You know, I'm saying at the moment, instead of minding your own business about this, you know, I think, you know, we should be minding our own business about what people are doing in terms of, you know, going out for 2 walks a day or whatever. You know, that's I don't, you know, that's, I was getting a little bit carried away. But on this occasion, I do want you to mind your business, or not mind your own business, if you see what I mean. I want you to be nosy. I want you to be aware, and I want you to actually really think about, like we never have before, that actually a domestic abuse problem, whether it's to animals or people, is not somebody else's problem. It's our problem as a nation, as a community, as a, you know, as a global issue, and but also very, very local to home. It's happening. If it's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men, or whatever the figures are, you will know people definitely that this is happening to. Okay, Wendy, well, thank you so much for spending your time. I know that, like me, you've been even busier during lockdown. So I'm really grateful that you've found a little window for me with your lovely Scottish home, and
any opportunity to share the work of the Links Group is fantastic, and raise more awareness and get everybody talking about it.
Yes. So what we'll do is, when this goes out in the show notes, we'll put the links in. We'll put the link also to that kind of
the course. Yeah,
yes, to the
brilliant.
course.
Yeah.
If anybody'd like to share it, so if anybody's listening here and they could share this, you know, with veterinary practices, with anybody that they know that's a delivery driver, that would be really useful. Anybody that works in a supermarket, all of these key workers, and I know that you do great work already, but actually, you know, just have an eye, and have just a little bit of part of your brain to look at what's going on that doorstep, and listen to what people are saying, because the clues will be there.
Yeah, you'll get a gut feeling. You'll think something doesn't feel right, and chances are it probably isn't right. So just make a call and talk to someone about it.
Yeah, brilliant, Wendy. I'm so grateful for your time today, and I'll
Thank
speak to
you.
you soon.
Keep up the great work.